What it was is I wanted to start off with a quote from a famous philosopher, Barry Switzer. He said, "Some people are born on third base, but go through their life thinking that they hit a triple." And I think that actually sort of deals with a lot of our modern politics. People either see that they're entitled or that they have luck. Warren Buffett talks about how lucky he was, that he was white and he was male and born in the United States. Black families actually transfer 20 times to 40 times less wealth between families. And what happens in elections actually matter in the long run. And I think that's the lens that we need to look at money and power and how it deals with politics. 30 years ago, I was elected to a student president position here on campus, and it seemed like a really big deal at the time. In retrospect, it was a lot of fun, but what I was able to do is appoint my executive committee from different people in the community. And this one guy I appointed was just a friend. I thought he was funny. I didn't know he would actually end up becoming the governor 20 years later. And Brad Henry was that guy. I'd like to say I taught him everything he knew, but not everything I know, but it wouldn't be right. He's really smart and a lot of fun. His election in 2002 was really interesting because a lot of people say there was 3 C's involved. There was cockfighting, there was cussing, and there was contempt. And what's interesting, some people think he won the election because cockfighting was on the ballot and it brought out a rural electorate that voted for him. Some people say it was the cussing of his opponent that was on the other side that got sort of upset at a reporter one time and affected the election. But the third thing was there was a third-party candidate that was closer to his opponent that ended up getting 14% of the election. Brad ended up winning the election with 0.6%. But the reason why he really won it is because he worked really hard and he has a really smart wife named Kim, who's awesome. Go girls. Now the thing about it is that this last election, I ended up making a lot of bets. And it was only because I was looking at the statistics and information, but I cheated. I followed a guy named Nate Silver from the New York Times. You've probably heard about him. He ran a blog back in 2007, 2008 called 538. He ran it under an assumed name called Poblano. It was picked up, and actually it's done incredible things for the New York Times youth and information. But Nate was this sort of uber geek, statistician, wonder kid that was really focused on baseball statistics and internet poker. But then he took in all the polls of polls, looked at them, weighted them, and determined what would be the likelihood of who would win the election. And what he decided in 2008 was that he predicted 49 out of 50 states correctly. And the way that he did that was through numbers. This time he predicted 50 out of 50 states. And all the conservative pundits all over, and pundits on all sides, were decrying that you could actually look at information, run it through an algorithm, and come up with what the likelihood was. It wasn't that somebody was going to win by 75%. It was that 3 out of 4 times when you run this election through the cycle of what information that he was getting in, he was able to predict it. Now, algorithms sound like a really sort of scary, weird, esoteric word, but it's pretty simple. All it is a set of instructions to try to solve a problem. It takes a systematic, automatic calculation. And it actually was started, listen to this guy's name, by Abu Abdullah Muhammad Ibn Musa al-Grizm, all right? This might be one reason why certain politicians deny science. But what he did in the 9th century is he came up with this, and it was a real simple framework, but we really couldn't do anything about it until the 1700s and 1800s when more math was built on it. But it was only until the 30s and 40s that the computer age started coming in, and you could start taking that information and do something with it. And all it does is try to say, let's ask a question, let's put it to some numbers to it, and let's see what the answer is that it actually comes out. There's a guy named Bruce Bueno de Maquista that actually has taken this a step further. He's a guy that's called a modern-day Nostradamus. You might have seen some specials about him or written one of his books. One of his books is called The Dictator's Handbook. And what he says is basically people compete, incentives matter, and that what you have to do to determine what's going to happen is that most people actually look at, and I want to say this exactly right, that people act in their own best self-interest. And if you look at that and then weight it and apply numbers to it, you can actually do forecasting. The CIA has said that he has a 90% accuracy rate when he tries to determine outcomes down the road. And he does it by just looking at people's behavior and then putting numbers to it. It also says that dictators aren't irrational. They're doing exactly what they need to be doing. They need to do the least amount for the few people to be able to stay in power. In democracies, what we have to do is we have to actually do more things for more people to stay in power. But the problem that I see that's happening more and more is that because of certain Supreme Court cases and more money flowing in, we have a way of upsetting that balance. Not any really longer is it the voters matter, but who has the money to influence those voters? And that makes a big difference in our elections, and I think it's really important. What's interesting is what he basically says is, who do you really have to keep happy? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But it's kind of like whoever pays the piper calls the tune. And the other part is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you actually might be on the menu. And so it's important who we elect and how we do it. There's some interesting numbers I want to throw out. 96% of the time, the person with the most money in an election wins. So all you have to do to win an election is come up with more money. And if we keep this arms race going, it's going to be only people with money that's going to be able to decide these elections. The other one is the return on investment for lobbying. And it's really interesting what Jack Abramoff said when he heard this number. The return on investment is $1 in and $220 out. There's a University of Kansas study that determined in one tax policy dealing with certain corporations that $1 equaled 220. And when Jack Abramoff heard this number, that there was a 22,000% return on your money for lobbying, he goes, I'm surprised it's so little. He ended up going to jail, and he sort of turned around, but we've gotten a lot of information from him. The co-founder of the Heritage Foundation said this back in 1980, and he was talking about the electorate and what we want the electorate to do or not do. He says, I don't want everyone to vote. Our leverage in an election, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down. And what that means is that when you start seeing hurdles, longer lines, difficulty to register, less days to vote, voting on Tuesday versus another day, anything that actually shrinks the electorate actually is good for certain people because it's easier to control and be able to get the outcome you want with less money when you have less people actually involved with the voting. Another problem is people talk about swing districts and how why is there so much controversy in Congress? Why is there so much gridlock? Why aren't they getting along? Well, this is the reason. From 1992 to today, number of swing districts determined by Nate Silver has gone from 100 to about 35. So no longer is it really the election deciding what's going on, but more who's winning the primary. And who's winning the primary, actually, you have to actually focus more on the fringe and the extreme element to win the race. So that's why when they go to Congress, you go, no matter what side the electorate you're on, you think that they're crazy, that why aren't they getting along? Why aren't they doing what I want? Well, it's because there is absolutely no incentive for them to, because staying in power and being elected is more important than doing the right thing. Now, what's interesting is that in a local election recently up the road here, we saw this. In a city council election that pays $12,000 a year, some outside force spent over $500,000 in the election. And the way they did that is they put it through a nonprofit and then another nonprofit. So there's absolutely no way to trace the money or determine who's giving the money. You don't know if it's someone out of state, out of country, whether it's one person or a dozen people or 1,000 people. What we do know, it's probably not a sidewalk lobby that wants more sidewalks. But what happens is after that election occurs, you have to decide who really are those people that get elected, if they win, beholden to. Are they beholden to the few thousand people that show up in an 80,000 person district? Or are they going to be beholden to ultimately who gave the money? Who are they going to listen to? We have a very rational human bias to do favors for people that do favors for us. That's why drug reps do what they do. That's why lobbyists do what they do. That's why some people donate so much money to political campaigns, because they want influence. So there's some solutions. And some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. Some of them are better. One solution is open primary, where you have a nonpartisan race, where you don't know who's who and everybody runs as one. California's playing around with this. The other one's called top two, where it doesn't matter, you don't have the parties fighting, you have whoever gets the two most votes. If no one gets 50%, then that person goes forward. But what's happening is that the best one is probably nonpartisan redistricting. What happens is when you have like a state, and let's say there's 10 congressional districts, there's a thing called packing and cracking. And what you can do is if you're the party in power at the state level, you can actually draw the districts in such a way that even though half the people are on one side of the electorate and half the people are on the other, you can draw it so only 1 or 2 people of one party gets in power and 7 or 8 or 9 get in the other ones by either putting all the people from one party into one district or splitting those people up. Obviously, it's a big problem. A computer, nonpartisan redistricting would probably do the best thing to start moving things forward. But what's the real solution? I've got the real solution. You ready? Old people and the internet. Now, that's not old people on the internet, because that makes no sense. Nothing would happen. It's old people and the internet. The old people is that, I hate to say it, but old people, there's some old thinking. And those people are dying, and old thoughts die out. In 2021, Nate Silver predicts that same-sex marriage amendment will pass in Oklahoma. 2021. It's because, because that bothers some people, but it doesn't bother others. The other thing is the internet. The internet is the most democratizing, decentralizing, organizing, and best tool that we're going to be able to actually connect with people that want to be involved. And that's the only way things are going to change. Now, what's interesting is I did make a bunch of bets, and I'm going to tell you how they turned out. I won them all. The problem is, most of them were for food. So I got a lot of lunches and a lot of dinners out of the deal. And I did make this one very large bet with this lady. And we did it on Facebook. So, it's on her wall and messages back and forth. And so this one was the biggest, non-food bet. And it's like, and I even said, gosh, we have so many mutual friends, it'll keep us honest. But what happened is 2 days after the election, I'm trying to get to her Facebook page, and I experienced the 2009 word of the year from the Oxford American Dictionary. I was unfriended. But that's okay. We're talking about these world-changing ideas, and we all want to create the thing or the idea that really makes a difference and is going to change everything. But I'm going to tell you what, it's going to be hard to change the world. It's going to be hard to change the nation. It's going to be hard to change the state. But what we can do, and what we can really focus on, is with our time and our relationships, we can actually really say yes and connect with the local. Thanks.